everyone, it's Mona at Klatch. We're making a nativity scene coaster today, and this time I'm going to do it right. I've prepared my resin. I'm using the Easy Cast, and I'm using some very dark blue glitter. Now we just need a thin coat along the bottom, but I want to make sure that it's a solid coat with the glitter. This is going to be the background for the nativity scene. Let it spread around, it'll settle. You can pop any bubbles as they come to the top with your lighter. And once that cures, we'll be able to move on to the next step. The first layer of resin has hardened, and now I'm just going to take some brown acrylic paint and paint on the background for the manger. I've picked out twigs and I've shortened them to be the length that I want, and I'm going to trim the roof of the manger and the sides. And I'll have 3 on top on each side and 3 on each side this way. And I also have 2 in the middle that I'm going to turn into a cross. I also took some darker brown and gold paint and just did little streaks down there on the back of the manger. Now here's a little manger scene that I found at Michael's. And all I'm going to do is use Mary, Joseph, and baby Jesus just because of my space restrictions. And they're pretty thick, so it's going to be thicker than a typical coaster, but this is how I'm going to have them in here. Just like this. But because they don't sit stable, what I'm going to do is shave off part of their sides. And to do that, I'm going to use my Dremel tool, and I have my little cutter on here, and all I'm going to do is shave it right off. So I have a pretty good feel of how I want everything to be. I have all my pieces cut to the size that I want to frame out the manger. And all you're going to do, I'm going to have 2 sides and then the top, and each of those pieces is going to take 3 little sticks, little twigs. And all I am going to do is glue. I'm using a fast drying super glue in a gel form. I'm going to put some glue on there, a little more if I need it, and then I'll put the 3rd piece right on top, just like that. It's a little pyramid, and I'm going to repeat that for each side and then the roof. So I'll have 4 pieces just like this, and I'll set it aside to dry. Then I'll take another piece, another stick, and I will break it to the size that I want, and then I'll glue it together and make a cross. And I will paint that with some gold paint. So I know roughly how this is going to be placed. And I have a skewer stick and I have some gold acrylic paint, and all I'm going to do is paint the North Star, or a star, but it's meant to represent the North Star. And I'm just going to make a little triangle. And in the meantime, while that's drying, these pieces that are now put together, you can take a little bit of the same colors that you did the background and paint it on these pieces just so that they match a little bit. You don't need to do it solid. I'm just going to do some light streaks on there just to kind of carry it over just a little bit. Okay, it's a moment of truth. This is where I screwed up the last one. And I've done this a little bit differently now. Now I have all of the pieces together like this, and last time I glued them down and then I poured in the resin, and because this is a natural material, the wood, releases a lot of oxygen or whatever, and I got tons of bubbles. So I'm going to do what I should have done the last time, and I'm going to use my tweezers, and I'm going to clean these with rubbing alcohol just as soon as I am finished, because I don't want them to get all gooped up with resin. And I have prepared some resin. I have more than I need. And I'm going to take Joseph, drop him in, take Mary, drop her in. Alright, I'm going to make sure they're nice and covered. Then I'll take them out, put her down, take him out, put him down, and I have a little working time. Now, and the reason I did this, 2 reasons. Number 1, they will stick where I put them once that resin dries or cures, and secondly, it will get rid of a lot of the possible bubbles that would come up from underneath them. So now I'm going to take my wood pieces one at a time, Put them in, let them really soak up some of the resin, and this should cut down on a lot of the bubbles. Okay, I'm going to put that one down. And this will also help it adhere to the background so it won't float either, because the wood will generally float in the resin. Now the only thing that I did actually glue on was this cross, and I just need to make sure I get a lot of resin on there, kind of just dripped on there to make sure that it soaks it up and I don't get any bubbles after the fact when I do my bigger pour. Now I have this stuff in place. We're still holding off on baby Jesus, and I have moss because they need some kind of a hay, and I don't have any hay or straw or anything. And I'm going to rip really small pieces of moss and drop it right into some of this resin. Everyone's where they need to be, and I'm going to just take some of this moss and let it drain a little bit. But I want to make sure that I had mixed it really well and that it was all covered with resin, because we don't want any surprise bubbles or anything coming up. And this will cut down on a lot of that later. And I'm going to just put this down at the feet of Mary and Joseph. And again, I told you this is going to be a very thick coaster, so just kind of be aware of that. Baby Jesus is in place. I'm just dripping some over the cross, some resin over the cross in different areas like the wood, just to seal it a little bit more. And that way when we do our final pour, we're not going to get the bubbles kicking up like I did the last time. And then we just want to let this sit, and we want to let this sit long enough to where the resin is hard enough where it's not going to release that wood and kick it up. I prepared some more resin. This stuff has all hardened. I don't see any bubbles in there. And I'm also going to paint over the one that I messed up. I sanded it down with a rough grit and then a finer grit. So hopefully, maybe it'll look okay. I don't know. So I'm going to start with that. The first thing I'm going to do is just take a disposable sponge brush, and I'm going to just paint it right on here. So we'll definitely see the bubbles. You'll be able to see my mistakes a little bit better. Once that dries, I'll show you. And then I'll just let that sit. And you can run your lighter over it if you see any bubbles or anything. Otherwise, just let it be. I'm going to make sure I didn't miss any spots. And then the rest of it, I'm going to just pour in here. Yeah, I might need to make just a little bit more. Now, when you're using a lighter, you be very careful around that grassy area not to set any of that on fire. Even though it's covered with resin, you just never know. You just want to be very, very careful, and you can use a straw if you would rather. So I'm going to let this sit for a little bit, and then I'll prepare a little bit more resin. I am going to take this almost all the way to the top. I've added the final layer, and now I'm just going to let it sit for a minimum of 12 hours before I unmold it. Here's the coaster that was repaired, and if you look closely, you can see the bubbles. Here, let me point it out here, where they came up at the ends of the wood. I wasn't able to get rid of that. I was able to sand it down so it's a pretty smooth surface, and then I painted it over so it looks nice and glassy. But you can see, and here on the side, you can see the bubbles rise up from the ends of the wood. And that's why in the new one, I dipped it into the resin beforehand, because that helped seal it, so everything worked fine. Now let's unmold that one. So here is the other one. You can see that there aren't any bubbles that came from the ends of the wood or anything, and that's because I sealed it, and I think it turned out pretty good. So I hope you like it, and thanks so much for sticking with me through this, and I hope you like it too. Thanks for watching and commenting, and I hope you guys have the happiest of holidays. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and we will definitely see you next time. Happy crafting. You guys, I did something really stupid. I poured it, and I wanted to do one pour, and instead of doing, and I knew there were going to be a lot of bubbles. And if you can see what I did, I was getting a lot of bubbles, and because look, then I poked the toothpick in it. I got a big old lump going on here. I know better than this. Because the wood obviously was going to expel some... I'm so disappointed.